Mom threw away everything I owned while I was burying my grandpa, just to give my room to her stepdaughter. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name's Laura Quinn, I'm 22, and until that week, I thought I still had a home. I'd been living with my mom to save money while finishing college. My grandpa had just passed away, and I spent the weekend helping with the funeral, saying my goodbyes, and trying to hold myself together. He was the only person who ever made me feel truly seen. When I got back home, something felt off the moment I opened the door. The air smelled like cleaning spray and paint. My heart started racing. I went straight to my room, and my hand froze on the doorknob. The nameplate I'd had since I was 10 was gone. Inside, my room was empty. Not a single trace of me left. No bedspread, no books, no photos of Grandpa and me at the lake, nothing. The walls were painted a soft pink I'd never choose. For a second, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Lara? Oh, you're back early," Mom said. Her tone was flat, like she wasn't surprised or sorry. Behind her stood Mara, her new husband's 17-year-old daughter. Mara was holding one of my old pillows, smiling like it already belonged to her. That's when I understood. My room wasn't mine anymore. I asked, my voice shaking. "Where's all my stuff?" Mom crossed her arms. "You're grown, Lara. You don't need that clutter. I donated most of it. Mara needed space, and you're hardly ever here." I just stared at her. I'd been gone for 2 days for Grandpa's funeral. The thought that she could do this while I was burying him made my stomach twist. Mara brushed past me and set the pillow on the bed like I wasn't even there. The smell of my old lavender candle still hung faintly in the air, mixed with her new perfume. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. That night, Mom told me I could sleep in the basement. The basement was cold, damp, and half-finished. Concrete floor, one flickering light bulb, and a thin blanket she tossed me from the couch. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to them laughing upstairs. Mom, her husband, and Mara, like nothing had happened. Every sound echoed in the empty space. I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. That was the night I realized Grandpa had been right when he told me once. People show you who they are when they think you have nowhere else to go. And my mom had just shown me exactly who she was. Sunlight slipped through the small basement window, waking Lara with a chill. Her back ached from the hard floor. Upstairs, she heard footsteps and the clatter of dishes. She climbed the stairs slowly, hoping maybe her mom would feel some guilt after what happened. At the kitchen table, Diane sat with a cup of coffee, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. When she saw Lara, she didn't smile. "You're an adult now," she said, not even looking up. "It's time you found your own place." Lara froze, thinking she'd misheard. "What do you mean?" "I just came back from Grandpa's funeral." "I mean what I said," Diane replied. "You don't live here anymore. You've had years to get your life together. It's time you started acting like it." Her words hit harder than a slap. Lara glanced toward the hallway where her old room used to be, now hidden behind a freshly painted door. Mara's voice floated from inside, cheerful and smug. "Mom, where should I hang the fairy lights?" Diane called back. "Wherever you like, honey." She finally looked at Lara. "See? It's already her room. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Lara felt her chest tighten. "So you just threw away everything I owned?" Diane shrugged. "Some of it went to charity. The rest was trash. You shouldn't be so attached to old things." "Old things." Lara thought of her photo albums, her college notes, the quilt her grandpa made her when she was little. She turned away before Diane could see her eyes fill. Mara appeared in the doorway wearing one of Lara's hoodies, twisting the sleeves like a prize. "Your stuff was kinda outdated anyway," she said, smirking. Lara ignored her and went to the basement to pack what few belongings she had left. Some old shoes, a duffel bag, a few pieces of clothing that must have been overlooked. But something important was missing. She searched through every box, every drawer. The pocket watch, her grandpa's, was gone. It had been the one thing he'd promised would always be hers. Heart pounding, she went back upstairs. "Mom, where's Grandpa's watch?" Diane didn't answer right away. She rinsed her mug, dried it, then said flatly, "I don't know. Maybe it got donated. You left it behind." "I would never leave that behind," Lara said, voice trembling. "It was his." Diane sighed. "Then it's gone. Things get lost. Don't make a scene." Lara stood there, silent, staring at her mother's calm expression. It wasn't just the loss of a watch. It was losing the last piece of the only person who ever loved her without conditions. She turned and walked back down the stairs, gripping her empty duffel bag. In that moment, she knew she had no home left, not in that house, and not with that woman. Lara spent the day in silence, folding what little she had left into the back seat of her old car. Each trip up the basement stairs felt heavier, the house growing more foreign with every step. She told herself to stay calm, to keep her dignity, to just get through the packing without breaking. When she reached the hallway for one last box, laughter drifted from her old room. The door was open. Inside, Mara stood in front of the mirror, twirling and admiring herself. A faint metallic glint caught Lara's eye. Hanging loosely around Mara's wrist was Grandpa's pocket watch. For a second, Lara couldn't breathe. She stepped closer, her voice low but shaking. "Where did you get that?" Mara turned, feigning confusion. "Oh, this? Mom said it was up for grabs. Looks vintage, doesn't it?" She gave a little laugh and snapped the lid open like it was a toy. "Take it off," Lara said, her tone sharper now. Mara rolled her eyes. "Relax. It's just a watch." "It's not just a watch." The words burst out before Lara could stop them. "It belonged to my grandfather. You have no right." Before she could finish, Diane appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "What's going on in here?" "She's yelling at me," Mara said quickly, slipping behind Diane like a child in trouble. "All I did was wear this thing. You said it was fine." Diane's face hardened. "Lara, I told you to stop clinging to the past. That watch was sitting in a box for years. Mara likes it. Let her have something nice." Lara stared at her in disbelief. "You gave away something Grandpa trusted me with? How could you?" "Oh, please," Diane snapped. "You're not a little girl anymore. Grow up and let go." The words hit deeper than she expected. "You don't care about family," Lara whispered. "You only care about looking perfect for your new husband." Diane's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't twist things to make yourself a victim." Lara looked from her mother's cold expression to Mara's smug grin. Everything suddenly fit. The redecorated rooms, the staged smiles, the expensive new furniture. None of this was about starting fresh. It was about showing off, about money and image. Love didn't live here anymore. Maybe it never had. She reached forward, unclasped the watch from Mara's wrist despite her protest, and held it close to her chest. Then she turned to Diane. "You can have this house, your husband, and your lies. I'm done." Diane called after her, but Lara didn't turn back. She walked out the front door, the night air biting at her skin. She tossed the duffel bag into her car, started the engine, and drove away. For the first time, she didn't cry. The tears had dried long before, leaving only quiet, heavy grief and a promise forming deep inside her. She would never let them break her again. The nights were long and cold. Lara parked her car behind an old grocery store, wrapping herself in a thin blanket that smelled faintly of the basement. The seat was stiff, her neck ached, and sleep never lasted more than an hour at a time. She'd wake to the sound of passing cars, check her phone for messages that never came, and stare at the ceiling until the sky lightened. By the third night, she felt hollow. The world moved on around her, families shopping, people laughing, engines humming, while she sat invisible in a parking lot, watching her breath fog the glass. On the fourth morning, she dragged herself to work, eyes red from exhaustion. She thought she'd done a decent job hiding it until Jonas, a co-worker from the cafe, stopped her during break. "You okay? You look like you haven't slept in days." She hesitated, then muttered, "Just rough week." Jonas studied her for a moment. "Don't tell me you're sleeping in your car." Her silence gave her away. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've got a spare room. It's small, but it's better than that." At first she refused. Pride was all she had left. But when the sun set again, and the cold crept in through the car doors, she realized pride wouldn't keep her warm. The next morning she accepted. Jonas's apartment was modest, old hardwood floors, chipped counters, but clean and quiet. He didn't ask for details, just handed her a key and said, "Mi casa, Lara, as long as you need." Days turned into weeks. She threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts, saving every tip she could. The ache inside her dulled into focus. She kept her phone on silent, ignoring every unknown number that might have been her mother. Late one night after her shift, she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone. Out of habit, she searched her grandpa's name. A link popped up, a local estate auction page. She clicked it, not expecting much. Her chest tightened as the images loaded. There was his old armchair, the one she used to curl up in during storm. The oak desk where he wrote her birthday letters. Even the handmade cabinet he'd promised would be hers someday. Price tags hung from everything, the pieces of his life scattered for strangers to bid on. She scrolled faster, her hands shaking. A caption under one photo read, "Estate sale organized by Diane Monroe." Lara stared at the name. Her mother had sold everything, every memory, every trace of the man who'd loved them both, without a word. Her phone slipped from her hand onto the couch. For a long time, she just sat there, staring into the dark apartment. The quiet hummed around her, broken only by the faint ticking of the watch she kept on the table beside her. That sound, steady, patient, was all she had left of him. Morning light spilled across the kitchen table as Lara sorted through a pile of papers she'd been gathering for weeks. Crumpled receipts, photocopies, and printouts spread across the surface like puzzle pieces. Each one told a story of something missing, money transferred, antiques sold, names scribbled on donation slips that didn't add up. She'd spent nights combing through old emails and bank records she still had access to. Her mother's name appeared again and again, tied to payments and transfers made right after Grandpa's death. Furniture sales, jewelry listings, donations that were anything but. Lara felt a cold focus settle over her. She wasn't angry the way she'd been before. This was quieter, sharper. Every new clue fed a steady determination that replaced the ache she'd been carrying. Jonas walked in, wiping his hands on a towel. "You've been up all night again, huh?" "Almost done," she murmured, not looking up. He studied the papers. "That looks serious." "It is." She pushed a page toward him, a printed statement showing a payment from an antique buyer. "That's Grandpa's desk. She sold it to pay off her husband's credit cards." Jonas frowned. "You're sure?" "I called the buyer," she said. "He told me she said her father's things didn't mean much to her. But he wasn't her father." The words hung in the air like something sour. Jonas leaned against the counter. "You can't let that slide." "I don't plan to." Lara's voice was steady, almost calm. "She's not just greedy. She broke the law. Grandpa left that property to both of us. She had no right." Jonas nodded slowly. "I might know someone who can help. My friend Tyler, he's a lawyer. Not fancy, but he's good with estate stuff. You should talk to him." That night, she met Tyler in a small diner. He listened carefully as she laid out the documents, his expression tightening the more she spoke. When she finished, he leaned forward. "If everything you're showing me checks out," he said, "then it's not just unethical, it's fraud. She could lose everything." Lara didn't smile, didn't flinch. "Good." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "You want her charged?" "I want her to understand," she said quietly. "Every lie, every dollar, everything she stole meant something to him, and to me. She took all of it like it was nothing. I want her to feel what that's like." He nodded. "Then we'll make sure she does." When Lara left the diner, the air felt lighter, cleaner. She walked to her car with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. For the first time since the funeral, she wasn't lost. She wasn't just chasing justice anymore. She was building it piece by piece, and she wasn't stopping until her mother's world cracked the same way she'd shattered her. Weeks passed before Lara sent the first message. Her hands trembled as she typed, "Hey Mom, I've been thinking a lot lately. Maybe we could talk sometime." She stared at the screen for a long time before pressing send. The reply came within minutes. "I'm glad you reached out, honey. I knew you'd come around." Lara exhaled slowly, forcing her heart to stay calm. Every word she wrote had to sound warm, believable. She talked about work, about moving on, about wanting to fix things. Each message was crafted like a step in a quiet trap. Diane responded eagerly, her tone dripping with relief and pride, as if she'd won something. After a few days, Diane called. Her voice was light, cheerful. "We're having a little get-together for Mara's 18th next weekend. You should come." It'd mean a lot to her. Lara's lips curved faintly. "I'd like that." Diane laughed softly. "I knew you'd come to your senses. You've grown up, Lara." When the call ended, Lara sat in the darkened apartment for a long moment, staring at her reflection in the window. The face that looked back wasn't the same girl who'd begged for answers months ago. She was quieter now, her anger colder, her purpose clear. The next few days were filled with preparation. She double-checked every document, copies of transfers, witness statements, legal notes from Tyler. Each piece of paper slipped neatly into a manila folder labeled with a single word, truth. But there was one thing still missing. For weeks, Lara had been tracking down a rumor she'd heard, that an antique watch matching her grandfather's had surfaced at a pawnshop across town. She'd called ahead twice, describing every scratch in detail. The owner finally confirmed it had come in a month earlier. That night, Lara drove across the city. The shop was small and dim, the kind of place that smelled like old leather and dust. Behind the counter, an elderly man adjusted his glasses as she entered. "You called about the watch." She nodded. He opened a glass case and set it gently on the counter. The metal was worn, the engraving faint but familiar. "For Lara, keep time for yourself." Her throat tightened. "How much?" He studied her face, then said quietly, "For you? Just take it. I can tell it means something." She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper of thanks. Back in her car, she held the watch in her palm. It was cold at first, then warm against her skin. The ticking sounded steady, patient, like her grandfather's voice telling her to wait for the right moment. She fastened it around her wrist and looked out through the windshield toward the horizon. The house she'd once called home waited for her, full of people who thought they'd won. Not for much longer. The night of the party, the house glowed with string lights and the hum of soft music. Laughter spilled from the living room, mingling with the clink of glasses. Lara parked down the street, watching the scene for a moment before stepping out. Her heart pounded, steady as the ticking of the watch on her wrist. Inside, nothing had changed. Polished floors, spotless counters, and that same false warmth that always filled the place when guests were watching. Diane spotted her first, beaming like the perfect hostess. "Laura, you made it. I'm so happy you're here." Laura smiled politely. Wouldn't miss it. She could feel eyes turning toward her, whispers slipping between bites of food. Mara sat at the head of the table, dressed in glitter and pride. A pile of wrapped gifts surrounded her, bright paper and ribbons stacked high. Diane hovered nearby, radiant in her new dress, her husband Mark laughing beside her. Dinner passed in slow motion. Compliments, toasts, the usual parade of fake kindness. Laura stayed quiet, waiting. When dessert was served, she stood and placed a small white box in front of Mara. Mara grinned. "A gift from you? Didn't expect that." "Open it," Laura said softly. The room fell still as Mara lifted the lid. Inside lay only a folded note. Confusion flickered across her face as she read aloud. "You took everything from me. Now watch it all disappear." Whispers rippled around the table. Diane's smile faltered. "What is this supposed to mean?" Laura reached into her bag and laid a thick folder on the table. "It means I'm done pretending." She opened it, spreading the contents like cards, receipts, transfer records, photos of sold antiques, signatures, every proof she'd gathered. Mark leaned forward, frowning. "What are these?" "Evidence," Laura said. "Your wife sold off my grandfather's estate, things that didn't belong to her. She used the money to pay debts. Not just hers, but yours too, Diane." Mark's chair scraped back sharply. "What debts?" Diane stammered. "Mark, don't listen to her." But he was already flipping through the papers, his face turning red. "You took money out of my account? Sold my watch collection." Guests started murmuring. Someone gasped when they recognized Diane's signature on the sale form. The room erupted, voices overlapping, chairs shifting, forks clattering against plates. Mara shoved the empty box away, her face pale. "Mom, what's going on?" Diane reached for her, but Mara pulled back, tears forming. "You told me everything was fine." Laura stepped aside, watching the scene unfold without a word. Mark slammed a fist against the table, shouting at Diane, while guests awkwardly excused themselves, slipping toward the door. The smell of frosting and perfume turned sour in the tension. By the time Laura reached the porch, shouting still echoed behind her. Through the window, she saw Diane's perfect world cracking, her husband furious, her daughter crying, her guests scattering. Laura didn't smile, but her chest felt lighter. The truth was finally out, and there was no taking it back. Days after the party, the house that once seemed untouchable stood silent behind a for sale sign. The manicured lawn looked dull, the curtains drawn tight. Diane's husband had left without a word to anyone but the realtor. The whispers around town spread fast. Money gone, marriage broken, the perfect image shattered. Laura heard pieces of it through co-workers and neighbors, though she never asked. She didn't need the details. She already knew how the story ended. Diane had built her comfort on other people's pain, and now the walls were closing in. One evening, Lara's phone lit up with a familiar number. She almost ignored it, but let it ring through once, twice, until her thumb betrayed her. She answered. The voice on the other end cracked. "Lara, it's me." A long pause followed. Lara said nothing. "I don't have anywhere to go," Diane whispered. "Mark's gone. He took everything. I don't even have a place to sleep." Her words came rushed, broken. "Please. You're still my daughter." The silence stretched. Lara leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. "What do you want from me?" I need help. Just for a few days." "I'm sorry, Lara. I didn't mean for things to go this far." Lara closed her eyes, hearing the same voice that once told her to grow up, to move out, to let go. Only now the power in it was gone. "You made your choice," she said quietly. "You chose money over family, and now it's gone. All of it." Diane's breathing hitched. "I know. I was wrong. Please, I can't do this alone." Something inside Lara shifted, not pity, but recognition. The same cold emptiness she'd felt that night in the basement, the sting of being discarded like she didn't belong. Diane was feeling it now, and it fit her too well. "Meet me at the old diner on Main," Lara said finally. When Diane arrived, she looked smaller somehow, hair unbrushed, eyes hollow. She clutched a worn purse as if it might keep her from falling apart. Lara sat across from her, calm, steady. "I don't expect forgiveness," Diane murmured. "I just don't know where to go." Lara slid a small key across the table. "Room 13 at the Maple Inn," she said. "It's paid for a week." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I'll make it up to you, I swear." Lara stood before she could finish. "Don't." Her voice was quiet, steady. "Now you know what it feels like to lose everything and have no one to call." Diane reached out, but Lara stepped back. She turned toward the door, the bell chiming softly as she left. Outside, the air felt crisp and clean. Lara didn't look back. The sound of the door closing behind her was all the closure she needed. The morning was quiet when Lara parked at the edge of the cemetery. Dew clung to the grass, and the air smelled faintly of rain. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers and the old pocket watch, its chain wrapped carefully around her fingers. Each step toward the familiar stone felt like walking back through years she'd spent trying to hold on to him. The headstone was simple, his name, his service emblem, and the words always kept time for others. Lara knelt beside it, brushing away a few fallen leaves. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then her voice broke the stillness. "I did it, Grandpa," she whispered. "You were right about everything." She set the flowers down and traced the engraving with her thumb. "I lost the house. I lost her. But I finally see what you meant about standing on my own." The wind stirred, soft and cool against her cheek. "You were the only one who ever believed I could." The watch ticked faintly in her palm, the same rhythm she'd listened to as a child sitting on his porch. It felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of what it had survived, the lies, the betrayal, the silence that had nearly swallowed her whole. She smiled faintly. "I thought revenge would make me feel better, and for a while it did. But it didn't fix anything inside me. It just reminded me what matters, what you taught me." Lara sat there for a long while, talking quietly, telling him about her job, about Jonas's kindness, about the peace that came after the storm. She didn't mention her mother's name. Some things didn't deserve to be spoken. When she stood, she opened her wallet and pulled out a folded slip, a receipt from a donation she'd made that morning. A large part of her savings had gone to restore the Veterans Park downtown, the one her grandfather used to visit every Sunday. She remembered sitting on the swings while he fed the pigeons, his laughter echoing over the sound of the flag rustling. "They're fixing the benches," she said softly, "planting new trees. I made sure your name's going on the plaque." Her throat tightened, but she didn't cry. She slipped the watch into her pocket and looked around, rows of stones, each one a story, each one a life that had touched someone else. For the first time in months, she felt still. There was no forgiveness in her heart, not yet. Maybe not ever. But there was peace, and that was enough. Lara placed her hand against the stone one last time. "I'm keeping time for myself now," she said quietly. Then she turned toward the path, the sound of the ticking watch following her as she walked back toward the sunlight. The months that followed slipped by quietly. The days no longer felt heavy, and the nights finally let her rest. Lara's new apartment was small but warm. Sunlight poured through wide windows, spilling across the wooden floor where her few pieces of furniture sat neatly in place. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Every item inside was something she'd chosen, not inherited, not borrowed, and not stolen from her. Her mornings began with the smell of coffee instead of tension. She worked, came home tired, and slept deeply. Sometimes, she caught herself listening for voices that weren't there, echoes from a house she no longer thought about. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt like breathing again after being underwater too long. One afternoon, a knock broke that calm. The mail carrier handed her a large brown envelope marked with a law firm's seal. Her name was written neatly across the front. She hesitated before opening it, heart thudding just once in her chest. Inside were several documents and a small wooden box wrapped in tissue paper. She set the papers aside and lifted the lid of the box first. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, was a folded note in her grandfather's handwriting. Her breath caught the moment she recognized the slanted letters. The ink had faded a little, but the words were still clear. "For my girl who never gave up." She pressed the note to her chest, feeling the ache rise and fall quietly like a wave. Beneath it lay a simple ring of keys and a property deed in her. The lawyer's letter explained it all. The estate review was complete, and every remaining asset from her grandfather's will was now legally hers. The small cabin near the lake, the savings account, everything he'd worked for. It had finally come back to where it belonged. Tears slipped down her face, not from sadness but something lighter, cleaner. She set the letter aside and reached for the watch resting on her table. The metal was cool against her skin, polished smooth from years of being carried, lost, and found again. She fastened it around her wrist, feeling the familiar weight settle there. The ticking filled the quiet room, steady and sure, like the sound of a heartbeat that had always been waiting for her to catch up. Lara walked to the window and pushed it open. Morning sunlight spilled across her face, warm and bright. Down below, the street was alive. Kids on bikes, dogs barking, someone humming as they watered plants. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. She stepped out into the hallway, keys in hand, the watch ticking softly at her wrist. No more running, no more waiting for someone else to do right by her. The door clicked shut behind her, and she walked toward the sun, free at last. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away from them, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.